The rain wouldn't let up that night, pounding against the windows of our quiet suburban house in upstate New York. It was the kind of storm that made everything feel like it was falling apart. I stood alone in the kitchen, holding a mug of chamomile tea that had long gone cold, watching the water streak down the glass outside. My name's Claire. I'm 38, a wife, a stepmother. For over 10 years, I've built what looks like a perfect life: white picket fence, trimmed lawn, a husband with polished shoes and firm handshakes. But behind closed doors, everything felt hollow. I moved like a ghost through that house. David, my husband, was upstairs, his face lit by the glow of yet another Zoom meeting. His voice was just a dull hum coming through the floor. We hadn't really seen each other in years. I'd become invisible, a fixture in the background. I cooked dinners he barely touched, folded clothes he never noticed, and smiled through every, "How are you two doing?" from the neighbors. "We're doing great," I'd answer, voice sweet, chest tight. But the truth was, I wasn't great. I felt empty, not hungry for food, but for something else, something I couldn't quite name. I used to feel alive. I used to laugh without thinking about who might hear. There was a time when David would pull me close at night, whispering things into my skin that made me feel wanted. But time had rubbed those memories thin. The kisses stopped, then the questions, then the eye contact. I'd stand right in front of him, my hair curled, wearing the same dress he once couldn't resist, and he wouldn't even look up from his phone. I told myself that's how marriages were supposed to go, quiet, settled, uneventful. Wanting more started to feel like asking for too much. So I carried that loneliness around with me like a weight I couldn't put down. I kept the house running. I kept smiling. I kept waiting for something to change, even though deep down, I knew it wouldn't. But I wasn't entirely unseen. Someone else noticed. Someone else paid attention to the way I paused when I was tired or how my smile faded when David ignored me. That someone was Noah, David's son from his first marriage. I first met him when he was 10 years old, shy and small, with eyes that always seemed too thoughtful for his age. Maybe we bonded so quickly because his father didn't make time for him, and I did. Or maybe I saw something of myself in his quiet ways. I baked cookies with him, helped him with schoolwork, showed up at his soccer games when David couldn't. I became his biggest cheerleader. Over the years, he grew. Taller, stronger, more sure of himself. By the time he turned 18, he looked like a man. Broad shoulders, calm voice, a quiet strength that made me proud. He was my stepson, my family, my boy, but something changed between us. Recently, I began to notice the way his eyes stayed on me just a little longer than before. His smiles felt warmer, softer, almost tender. I tried to tell myself I was imagining things, that it was just the emptiness in my life playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just in my head. It started like any normal evening. Noah came home from soccer practice looking worn out, moving a little slower than usual. His expression was tight, like he was trying to hide how much something hurt. When he eased himself down onto the couch, I saw the wince he tried to hide. "Just tweaked my back," he said lightly, brushing it off like it was nothing. But I could tell he wasn't okay. The strain in his voice, the way he shifted in his seat, it was more than just a small ache. I offered to call the doctor, concern rising in my chest, but he gave a small smile and shook his head. The school nurse said rest and heat. I'll be fine. But later that night, I found him lying awkwardly on the couch, a heating pad pressed against his back. His jaw was tight, his eyes closed like he was trying to will the pain away. Something in me reacted instantly. Maybe it was the part of me that had spent years taking care of others. "You want some help?" I asked softly, pausing in the doorway. He opened his eyes, surprised, the low light catching the soft amber tones in them. I hesitated. "I used to help your dad when his back hurt. I could give you a quick massage. Might loosen it up." The offer felt simple, natural, but there was a heaviness beneath it, a part of me I didn't want to examine too closely. Still, this was just me being caring, right? Just helping someone I loved. Noah didn't respond right away. He just looked at me, his gaze calm, serious. Then, in a quiet voice, he said, "Yeah, I'd like that." My stomach fluttered unexpectedly, but I ignored it. I went to the bathroom and grabbed a bottle of unscented lotion, the kind I used when David's back would seize up. When I came back, Noah had turned onto his stomach, lifting his shirt just enough to reveal the lower part of his back. I sat beside him, trying to steady my hands as I leaned forward. The room was nearly silent, except for the soft murmur of the television and the ticking clock on the mantel. I pressed my hands gently against his back. His skin was warm and tight with tension. As I began to work the muscles slowly, I felt him exhale, his whole body relaxing just a little. For a while, that's all it was, innocent, quiet, comforting. But then he shifted slightly, and his shirt slid up further. My fingers accidentally brushed the bare skin along his side, smooth, firm, warmer than I expected, and something stirred inside me. It wasn't desire, not yet. Just a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years. A spark, a quiet reminder that I was still a woman with feelings that hadn't completely faded. I drew my hand back quickly, my voice catching as I asked if it was too much pressure. He shook his head, his voice low and calm, barely above a whisper. "No, you're the only one who makes me feel cared for," he said softly. My hands froze where they rested on his back. The room seemed to go still, the air heavier, as if even time had stopped moving. My heart pounded in my chest, loud and impossible to ignore. I stared at the back of his head, taking in the unruly mess of his hair, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. He didn't move, he didn't take it back. "What did you say?" I whispered, unsure if I wanted him to repeat it. He didn't, he just turned his head slightly, just enough for me to glimpse his expression. His eyes were soft, open, completely unguarded. "Nothing," he said, but it wasn't nothing, it was everything. I should have laughed it off, stood up, ended it right there. But instead, I reached for the lotion again, even as my fingers trembled. I kept going, pretending nothing had changed, even though something clearly had. It was quiet and subtle, but I could feel it. A shift. His words lingered in the room, warm and heavy, filling spaces I'd kept locked up for years. And deep inside, the wall around my loneliness cracked just enough to let something new in. After that night, life looked the same on the outside. Noah never mentioned what he'd said, and I didn't either. We returned to our routines, him heading off to school and soccer, me keeping the house in order, and David still buried in his work, always too busy to notice much. But under the surface, everything felt different. I couldn't stop thinking about those words, the way they'd landed so gently but deeply, like rain falling on dry, aching ground. "You're the only one who makes me feel cared for." I told myself he was just being kind, that maybe he was grateful and nothing more. I tried to dismiss it as wishful thinking, the result of being so emotionally starved that I was reading too much into a single moment. But then I started to notice the way he looked at me. Not just in passing, but really looked. When I was setting the table, when I laughed too loudly at something on TV, or even just when I tucked my hair behind my ear. His gaze lingered in a way that made it hard to ignore. He wasn't just watching, he was seeing me, and the worst part, I loved it. I hadn't felt that visible in years. I started doing small things I hadn't done in a long time. I pulled out a blouse I used to love, a soft blue one that brought out my eyes. I put on a little perfume, just a hint, not for anyone in particular, or so I told myself. I even brushed mascara over my lashes, smoothed my hair with more care than usual. It wasn't about seduction, it was about remembering who I used to be, the version of me that existed before I became someone's wife, someone's stepmom. The woman who had slowly forgotten how to feel alive. But Noah noticed. He always did. He'd smile when I walked into a room, like he saw something I hadn't shown the world in years. His eyes would linger a little longer each time, and he'd say things like, "You look nice today," his voice soft and thoughtful. Or, "That color looks really pretty on you." They were simple words, harmless on the surface, but to me, they felt like oxygen after years of drowning in silence. David hadn't offered me a real compliment in so long that I'd nearly forgotten what it was like to be noticed. He'd come home, toss his keys on the counter, and walk right past me without so much as a glance. I'd stand in front of him, sometimes even wearing something new or doing my hair a little differently, and he'd step around me like I was just another piece of furniture. It used to sting. Eventually, I grew numb to it. But now someone was looking again. Seeing me. And I hated how much I needed it. The massages became a quiet ritual. A few days after that first night, Noah walked into the kitchen with a wince, one hand pressed against his side. "Still hurts," he murmured, sounding slightly embarrassed. Must have slept wrong. My heart thudded at his words, and I nodded like it was nothing. That evening, with David either upstairs or working late, Noah lay on the couch again. The house was dim and quiet, shadows soft against the walls. I knelt beside him, my hands tracing familiar paths over his back and shoulders, working away the tension. At first, it stayed within the lines, motherly, caring, focused. But gradually, something shifted. We didn't say anything out of bounds. There were no confessions, no explicit declarations. But the silence between us thickened. My fingers lingered a little longer. I pressed into the contours of his muscles with a touch that grew slower, more deliberate. His breath deepened under my hands. His eyes often stayed closed, and I began avoiding his gaze, afraid of what he'd see in mine. But he always looked, and when he did, it felt like his eyes saw straight through me, like I was the only person that existed in that moment. One evening, after a massage, I rested my hand on his arm, just for a moment, before I could think better of it. But he reached up and held it there. Not forcefully, just gently, firmly, like he needed to. My breath caught in my chest, and I felt my heartbeat pulse all the way through my fingers. He looked up at me, his face open, vulnerable. "Do you ever wish things were different?" he asked softly. I froze. Words caught in my throat and refused to come out. My mind scrambled for a safe answer, but all I could do was stare. Then he continued, careful and slow, as though the words were precious and dangerous all at once. "Like, you were with someone who saw you." That word, saw, hit harder than I expected. Because that's exactly what he did. He saw the fatigue I tried to hide, the sadness buried behind polite smiles. He saw the way I hesitated when David asked about my day, knowing full well he wasn't really listening. And in return, Noah gave me something I didn't even realize I was starving for. He made me feel visible again. I pulled my hand away, my voice unsteady. "We can't talk like this, Noah." He didn't argue. He just gave a slow, understanding nod, his eyes soft with something like sadness, and let me go. But after that, the space between us kept changing. It wasn't loud or scandalous, just small things that slowly added up. Noah started doing more around the house. He'd bring in the groceries without being asked. In the afternoons, he'd make me tea and slide it across the counter with a quiet smile, like it was a secret between us. He started spending more time in the kitchen, sitting nearby while I cooked, asking about my day in a way that made it clear he genuinely wanted to hear the answer. And little by little, I began to feel something dangerous stirring beneath the routine. He started opening up more too, about school, his friends, and how lost he felt some days. And I listened, really listened, because no one had been listening to me for a long time. Somehow, in the quiet corners of that house, we became each other's safe space. A refuge from David's growing absence, from the cold silence that had wrapped around our lives like a second skin. It was terrifying, the way it all unfolded, because technically, nothing was wrong. Not yet, but everything felt precarious, like one breath could topple the entire thing. We never named what was happening. We danced around it, careful not to break the fragile thing that had taken root between us. But the truth doesn't like to stay hidden. It slips through the cracks, waiting for the perfect moment to expose itself. That moment came on another rainy night, the kind where the sky feels too low and the air too heavy. David had flown to Denver on a business trip, leaving behind nothing more than a distracted peck on my cheek. No text when he landed, no check-in. Just silence. The house felt cavernous in his absence, the quiet pressing in from all sides. I was upstairs, curled on the bed with a book I wasn't really reading, when I heard the front door open. Noah's footsteps were slow, hesitant. He called up to me, his voice tight with discomfort. "Claire, my back's killing me again. The rain's making it worse." He didn't ask, not directly. Just stood at the edge of the hallway, his hoodie damp and clinging to him, his face pinched with pain. I should have told him to take a hot shower, stretch, try to sleep. That would have been the safe choice. But I looked at him, at the way his shoulders slumped, the weariness in his eyes, and something inside me softened. Or maybe it broke. "Okay," I said quietly. "Just for a little bit." He followed me down to the living room, neither of us speaking. I grabbed the bottle of lotion, my hands moving automatically, but everything else felt unfamiliar. Unsteady. He lay down on the couch, face down at first, then pulled off his shirt with a quiet wince. The low lamplight traced shadows along his back. Outside, the rain tapped against the windows like a heartbeat. I sat beside him, my fingers trembling as they met his skin, warm, tight with strain. I worked carefully, deliberately, trying to focus on the tension in his muscles rather than the tension building in the room. His breathing slowed, his body softened under my touch. For a moment, it was just a massage, just care. Then he reached back, quietly, gently, his hand resting on mine. Not in demand, not even bold, just a quiet question waiting for an answer. I froze. My thoughts blanked. Every part of me screamed to pull away. But I didn't. I stayed. I let my hand remain beneath his. He turned, slow and careful, shifting onto his side to face me. His eyes met mine. No masks. No fear. Just raw emotion, bare and vulnerable, and suddenly, we were somewhere we couldn't come back from. "Why do we have to pretend?" he asked. His voice wasn't angry or manipulative, it was quiet, heavy with sadness and sincerity. I felt my throat tighten, the words trapped somewhere behind fear and guilt. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. He just waited, his eyes steady on mine, unblinking. Finally, I whispered, "Because it's wrong." He nodded once, as if he already knew the answer. But he didn't pull away. He didn't look away. Instead, he reached out and brushed his fingers lightly across my cheek. The softest touch, barely there, but it sent shivers through me. I closed my eyes, trying to breathe through the chaos inside me. When I opened them again, he was closer. Close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath on my lips. We didn't move. We didn't speak. We just stayed in that still, fragile moment, balanced on the edge of something we both wanted but were terrified to reach for. Time seemed to hold its breath. Outside, the wind battered the windows, the rain poured steadily, but inside, everything was still. The space between us didn't blur, it disappeared. And when morning came, I couldn't bear to look at myself. Not in the mirror, not in the reflection off the picture frame glass, not even in my own memory. I kept trying to convince myself nothing had really happened. That no physical line had been crossed. No words spoken that couldn't be taken back. But it didn't matter, because something had happened, something unspoken, undeniable, and we both felt it. The silence between us, once easy and safe, now felt unbearable. So I started avoiding him. I lingered longer in my bedroom. I slipped out of the kitchen when I heard him coming. I busied myself with chores, cleaning, organizing, folding laundry, anything to keep from standing still long enough to feel the weight of what we'd nearly done. But every time I turned around, he was there. Not pursuing, not confronting, just watching, not in a threatening way, but in a way that pierced right through me. His eyes were too soft, too open, too understanding. And every time they met mine, I had to look away. Guilt colored everything. Pouring a cup of coffee felt wrong, folding his t-shirts felt wrong, even laughing at a movie when he walked into the room made my chest tighten. It wasn't just about that night. It was about what I had felt, what I was still feeling. And I didn't even know what exactly I was guilty of, wanting to be seen. Needing his attention, not stopping something that was never fully spoken, never fully acted upon. David began to notice, but only on the surface. "You're quiet lately," he said once, eyes glued to his laptop. "You okay?" I nodded, swallowing everything I wanted to scream. "I'm unraveling, and you don't even see me." But I stayed quiet. I knew what would come next, some well-meaning but empty suggestion. A massage gift card, a book, a new recipe to try. And then he'd go back to his spreadsheets, his email threads, his digital life. That's the thing about loneliness, it's not always about being alone. Sometimes, it's lying in the same bed with someone who has no idea you're drowning right next to them. A few days later, I found a folded piece of paper on my nightstand. No envelope, no name, just No's handwriting. "I'm sorry if I crossed a line, but I meant everything I said." My hands trembled as I read it, heart thudding in my chest. I knew I should have ripped it up or thrown it out, maybe even burned it, but I didn't. Instead, I folded it gently, tucking it beneath a pile of scarves in the back of my drawer, as if hiding it could silence what it stirred in me. But it didn't. That note was undeniable proof. Proof that I hadn't imagined it, that it wasn't all in my head. Proof that someone saw me, really saw me, and I wasn't sure I was ready to let that go. And that realization terrified me. Because part of me wanted to hold on, to his words, his warmth, the ache of being chosen. And what did that say about me? I'd always thought of myself as grounded, as strong. The kind of woman who knew better and chose right, even in the quiet moments when no one was looking. But now, I didn't know. Because loneliness doesn't shout, it seeps in slowly, quietly, until it fills your chest, your bones, your days, until you forget what it feels like to be held in someone's thoughts. Noah never forced anything, he never asked for more. He just looked at me like I was a person again. Not a wife, not a stepmother, not an afterthought. He noticed things, how I twirled my hair when I was nervous, how my smile dimmed when David didn't look up from his phone. He paid attention to my words. He asked how I was, and waited for the real answer. And that's what undid me, not the night on the couch, not the brush of skin or the note he left, but the slow, quiet way he made me feel real again. It made me question everything. Had I been leading him on without realizing it? Was I selfish, letting his affection fill the emptiness David had left behind? Or had I just convinced myself it was harmless, until one night proved it wasn't? I wanted to believe I was just fragile. That it was a moment of weakness, a crack in the foundation. But deep down, I knew better. Maybe I didn't stop it because I didn't want to. Maybe the feeling of being seen was the only thing keeping me from falling completely apart. Now I lived with the weight of it. The shame of what nearly happened. The fear of what could have. My mind kept circling back to that night, to the breath between us, the line we didn't cross, but came so close. If he had leaned in just a little more. If I hadn't whispered that it was wrong. Everything would have changed. Would I have stopped him? Would I have pulled away, or would I have let go? That question still haunts me. Because the woman I believed I was wouldn't have let it get that far. She would have seen the danger signs, shut the door before anything crept in. But the woman I've become, she lingered. She listened. She kept the note. And maybe the hardest truth is this: you don't have to act on something for the feelings to take root. They stay. They live inside me. This isn't just a story about temptation or betrayal. It's about being human, about the ache of emptiness, and how desperately we crave something, anything, when we've gone too long feeling nothing at all. It's about silence, how it starts as peace but grows until it becomes deafening. And it's about boundaries, about why they matter and how they protect not just others, but us from ourselves. If I could go back, I'd speak to Noah as the adult I should have been. Not as a stepmother or a friend, but with clarity. I'd tell him what we felt wasn't love, it was loneliness. A shared ache that felt like connection, but wasn't. I'd explain how boundaries aren't there to kill intimacy, but to keep us from getting lost in the wrong kind. That consent isn't just about yes or no, it's about timing, context, and emotional responsibility. I'd tell myself to seek help. To talk to someone, to confront David, to find my voice before the silence swallowed me. Because even though I didn't cross the line completely, I stood so close I still feel its heat. And sometimes I wonder, did I narrowly avoid something that would have broken me? Or did I miss something that, for a moment, might have made me feel alive? Either way, I've changed. I'm trying to rebuild, to speak louder, to ask for more from my marriage, and to walk away if it can't offer what I truly need. I've learned that being seen doesn't make a situation right. And that loneliness, no matter how deep, doesn't justify crossing lines that protect others, or ourselves. I'm sharing this because stories like mine often stay buried in silence and shame. But maybe, by speaking them aloud, we can find some understanding in each other. So I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a moment that blurred right and wrong? Was it love? Was it something deeper? Share your story in the comments. I read every one. And if this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt lost in the quiet, please like this video and subscribe to Broken Vows. We're a community that doesn't shy away from the hard things. We walk through them together. Some roads you never take. But standing at the edge still changes you. Be careful who you open your heart to, because someone is always listening. And sometimes, it's not the person who should be, but the one who wants to. That can heal you, or it can break you. Sometimes, it does both. This story is a work of creative nonfiction, inspired by emotional realities many people silently experience. While the characters and events may reflect familiar situations, names, details, and timelines have been changed or fictionalized for narrative impact and to protect identities. This content is intended for mature audiences and aims to foster reflection, empathy, and open conversation around complex emotional and relational dynamics. It is not meant to encourage or justify infidelity or boundary-crossing behavior in any form. Viewer discretion is advised. Thank you for staying with me through this deeply personal story. If it stirred something in you, if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or on the edge of something you couldn't quite name, just know, you're not alone. These stories aren't always easy to tell, but they matter. Because somewhere, someone else is quietly carrying the same questions, the same ache. If you found value in this, if it made you reflect, feel, or simply pause, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that speaks the truths we're often too afraid to say out loud. Here on Broken Vows, we don't shy away from the hard parts, we walk through them together. Until next time, be gentle with your heart, and careful who you give it to.